Introduction. The air in the small Philadelphia printing shop was thick with the smell of damp paper, hot lead, and linseed oil. It was 1726, and a 20-year-old man named Benjamin Franklin sat at a heavy oak desk, his fingers stained dark with ink. By all accounts, he was a genius. He was a writer, a scientist, and a thinker who would eventually help build a nation. But that night, he wasn't thinking about lightning rods or constitutions. He was staring at a small handmade book with a sense of deep frustration. He had decided to achieve moral perfection. He believed that if he just worked hard enough, he could cure himself of his bad habits. He picked 13 virtues to live by, things like sincerity, moderation, and frugality. He made a chart for each week, planning to put a little black dot next to every virtue he failed to keep. He thought that over time, the pages would become clean and white, showing he had finally mastered his life. Most of the virtues came easily to him. He was hard-working. He was honest. But there was one virtue, the third one on his list, that made him want to throw his inkwell across the room. He called it order. His rule for order was simple: let all your things have their places, let each part of your business have its time. For a man who could map the Gulf Stream and invent bifocals, this should have been easy. It wasn't. Day after day, week after week, the order row in his little book was covered in black dots. His papers were in heaps. His tools were never where they were supposed to be. He found that trying to keep a perfect schedule and a tidy workspace was more exhausting than any other task he faced. He was a brilliant man, but he was drowning in his own mess. He eventually realized that his struggle with order wasn't because he was lazy or bad. It was simply how his mind was built. He told a story about a man who bought an axe from a blacksmith. The man wanted the entire surface of the axe to be as bright and shiny as the edge. The blacksmith said he could do it, but only if the man turned the heavy grindstone himself. The man labored for hours, his arms aching, his breath coming in gasps. Finally, he looked at the axe. It was still covered in dark spots, speckles of rust and uneven metal. He looked at the blacksmith and said, "I think I like a speckled axe best." Benjamin Franklin, the patron saint of failed organization, eventually gave up on being perfectly tidy. He realized that a speckled axe still cuts wood just as well as a shiny one. He accepted that his faults in organization were the price he paid for a mind that was always moving, always creating, and always curious. The mountain in the living room. If you are holding this book, you probably know exactly how young Ben felt. You might be standing in your kitchen right now, looking at a mountain of mail, 3 half-empty coffee mugs, and a pile of laundry that has been sitting on the sofa for 4 days. When you look at that mess, you don't just see stuff. You see a list of your own failures. You feel a heavy weight in your chest that makes it hard to breathe. You might tell yourself that you are lazy, unmotivated, or broken. You see people on the internet with their perfectly organized pantries, where every spice jar is labeled in gold ink and the towels are folded into perfect squares, and you wonder why you can't just be normal. This feeling has a name. It's called the shame spiral. It starts when you notice a mess. Instead of just cleaning it, your brain starts to attack you. You think about how long the mess has been there. You think about the money you wasted on the food that went bad in the back of the fridge. You think about the ADHD tax, the late fees you paid because you lost the electric bill under a pile of magazines. Soon the task of doing the dishes feels like trying to climb a mountain while wearing a backpack full of rocks. This is what experts call the wall of awful. It's an invisible barrier, made of every bad feeling you've ever had about cleaning. It's built of shame, guilt, and the memory of every time someone told you to just get organized. For someone with ADHD, this wall is very real. It isn't a lack of willpower. It is a biological struggle. Your brain is wired to seek dopamine, the chemical that makes you feel rewarded and focused. Traditional cleaning is boring, repetitive, and offers zero dopamine. To your brain, folding a basket of socks feels like a physical threat. It's not that you won't do it, it's that your brain is actively trying to protect you from the pain of the task. The moral weight of dust. We live in a world that tells us a clean house is a sign of a good person. We've been taught that if our floors are sticky or our closets are overflowing, we have failed at being adults. We call our messes dirty secrets. We feel a jolt of pure terror when the doorbell rings unexpectedly, because we haven't spent 4 hours panic cleaning to hide the evidence of our lives. This idea that cleanliness equals goodness is a lie. It's a 19th century social construct that has no place in your modern life. Your home is not a museum meant to be looked at by others. It is a tool. It is a place where you live, eat, sleep, and create. If the tool is a little speckled, that doesn't mean it's broken. The goal of this book isn't to turn you into a professional organizer or a Pinterest-perfect homeowner. That path leads straight back to the shame spiral. Instead, we are going to build a neuro-affirming nest. This is a home that works with your brain, not against it. Imagine a home where you can find your keys in 5 seconds every single time. The doom piles didn't organize, only moved, are gone, replaced by systems that don't require lids or labels. You can host a friend for coffee without a single moment of panic. You have emergency resets that can make a room feel calm in just 10 minutes. You finally stop apologizing for the way your brain works. This is the transformation from a frustrated failure to a home curator. A curator doesn't try to keep everything perfect. They choose what matters, they set up systems to protect what's important, and they let go of the rest. Meet Sarah Jenkins. To see how this works in the real world, we're going to follow someone who is right in the middle of the struggle. Sarah Jenkins is 38 years old and lives in a house in Portland, Oregon. She works from home as a freelance graphic designer. She is creative, kind, and incredibly good at her job. But if you walked into Sarah's house at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday, you wouldn't see this successful professional. You would see a woman frozen in the middle of her kitchen. Sarah's kitchen island is the heart of her home, but it's currently buried under a doom pile of epic proportions. There are school permission slips for her son Leo, a half-finished knitting project she started 3 months ago, 3 different pairs of scissors, and a stack of mail she's too afraid to open. Her husband Mark is an accountant. He is neurotypical, which means his brain handles boring tasks with ease. When he comes home and sees the mess, he doesn't judge Sarah but "Why don't you just put it away?" feels like a knife to her heart. To Mark, putting it away is one step. To Sarah, it feels like 1,000 steps she can't quite put in the right order. Sarah's office is even worse. It's a graveyard of hobbies. She has a high-end sewing machine she used once, a collection of watercolor paints that have dried up, and stacks of books she bought because she was going to get organized this time. Just last week, Sarah bought a beautiful new floral planner. She spent 2 hours color-coding her schedule for the next month. By Wednesday, she had lost the planner. By Friday, she found it under a pizza box, completely blank. She threw it in the trash and cried. Sarah represents every person who has ever felt like they were drowning in a teacup. She has the skills, the intelligence, and the desire to have a calm home, but she is missing the manual for her specific brain. Over the course of this book, we are going to watch Sarah stop trying to be normal Sarah and start being ADHD Sarah. We're going to see her move from a state of total paralysis to a state of functional flow. The evidence for change. You might be thinking, I've tried every system out there. Why will this be any different? The reason most cleaning advice fails people with ADHD is that it's written by people who don't have ADHD. They tell you to do a little every day, or never leave a room empty-handed. For an ADHD brain, those are the hardest possible things to do. This book is based on executive function science and the history of environmental design. We are going to use the lessons learned by people like Florence Nightingale, who realized that the structure of a room could actually heal the people inside it. We'll look at the Frankfurt kitchen, the first space designed specifically to reduce friction and save human energy. We are going to use body doubling, a technique that uses the presence of another person to anchor your focus. We are going to implement the Launchpad, a system that ensures you never lose your essentials again. And we are going to use the triage method to handle those days when your energy is at zero. This isn't about working harder. It's about low-friction systems. If a system requires you to be consistent and disciplined every single day, it is a bad system for your brain. A good system is one that can break down on Monday and be reset on Tuesday in 5 minutes. The roadmap ahead. We have a lot of ground to cover, but we're going to take it one micro step at a time. In the first few chapters, we will dig into the why. We'll explore the neuroscience of why your brain treats a laundry basket like a predator, and how to dismantle the myth of laziness once and for all. We have to clear out the mental clutter before we can touch the physical clutter. Then, we will move into the how. We'll introduce the 5 pillars of the neurodivergent nest. These are the rules of visibility and accessibility that will change how you look at your shelves, your closets, and your trash cans. Yes, we are going to talk about trash cans, because for an ADHD brain, the right trash can is more important than the right planner. We'll tackle the Great Stink of 1858 to learn about triage and how to prioritize your health over your aesthetics. We'll learn from 19th century quilting bees how to use the power of community to get things done. We'll even look at the race to the South Pole to understand why adaptive systems always beat rigid plans. By the time we reach the end, you won't just have a cleaner house. You will have a different relationship with yourself. You will know how to automate your home so it runs on autopilot. You will know how to host friends without fear. And most importantly, you will know how to forgive yourself when things get messy again. Because things will get messy again. Life is messy. ADHD is messy. But in a reset-ready home, a mess is just a temporary state, not a moral failure. Benjamin Franklin never did find a place for everything. His desk remained a bit of a disaster until the day he died. But because he stopped fighting his own nature, he had the mental energy to discover electricity, invent the Franklin stove, and help start a country. Your mess is not a character flaw. It is a sign that your brain is busy with other things. It's time to stop trying to polish the whole axe and start embracing the beauty of the speckled life. The door to your new, calmer home is open. You don't need a new planner, and you don't need a better personality. You just need a system that loves your brain as much as we do. Start where you are. Use what you have. The journey to a reset-ready life begins with a single simple step. Let's go find Sarah in her kitchen and see what happens when the first doom pile starts to disappear. Chapter 1. Why does my brain treat laundry like a threat? The year was 1876, and the air in London was thick with the smell of coal smoke and damp pavement. Inside a quiet laboratory, David Ferrier sat hunched over a workbench, surrounded by the ticking of brass clocks and the soft glow of gas lamps. He was a man obsessed with the map of the human mind. At the time, most people believed the brain was just one big, mysterious sponge. They thought that if you were smart, you had a good sponge, and if you were lazy or scatterbrained, your sponge was simply lacking. Ferrier was about to prove them wrong. He was focused on a specific part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex, the very front slice of the mind right behind the forehead. In his experiments, he noticed something strange. When this specific area was quiet or damaged, the subjects didn't lose their strength. They didn't lose their ability to see or hear. They didn't even lose their will to do things. Instead, they lost something much more subtle and much more devastating: the ability to sequence. A subject might see a piece of fruit and want to eat it. They knew what the fruit was. They knew they were hungry. But they couldn't figure out the 3 or 4 steps required to reach out, pick it up, and bring it to their mouth. The knowing was there, but the doing had been disconnected. Ferrier had stumbled upon the biological home of what we now call executive function. He discovered that the front of our brain acts like the conductor of an orchestra. Without that conductor, the violinists and the drummers are all still there, and they all know how to play their instruments, but they can't make music together. They just make noise. The conductor who fell asleep. For a person with ADHD, the noise Ferrier discovered isn't just a scientific observation. It is the soundtrack of daily life. We often think of cleaning as a physical act, moving a hand, picking up a sock, wiping a counter. But for the brain, cleaning is a high-level symphony. It requires the conductor to stand up, wave the baton, and keep 20 different instruments in sync. When you look at a pile of laundry, your eyes see clothes. But your prefrontal cortex sees a massive multi-step project that requires sorting by color, checking pockets, treating stains, setting the machine, remembering the machine exists an hour later, moving wet clothes to the dryer, folding, finding the home for every single piece. If your internal conductor is tired, or if the sequencing wires are a little frayed, your brain doesn't see a pile of shirts. It sees a threat. It sees a task so complex and so full of potential crashes that it triggers the same part of your brain that handles a bear attack. This is the central myth we have to break, the idea that struggle equals a lack of effort. For decades we have been told that if we just tried harder, the laundry would get done. But Ferrier's work showed us that you can have all the will in the world, and if the sequencing center isn't firing, you are stuck at the starting line. You aren't lazy. You are experiencing a biological disconnect between your intentions and your actions. The mountain in the hallway. Sarah Jenkins stood in her hallway in Portland, staring at what her family called the laundry mountain. It was a Tuesday morning, and the house was finally quiet. Her husband Mark had taken the kids to school, and Sarah had a clear 2-hour window before her first freelance design client called. She had promised herself that today was the day. She was going to conquer the mountain. She walked toward the pile with a sense of purpose. She reached down and picked up one of Leo's soccer jerseys. It was stained with grass, and as she looked at it, she noticed the tag was half torn. That tag reminded her that Maya's winter coat also had a loose thread. Sarah turned around to go find the sewing kit in the kitchen drawer. On her way to the kitchen, she passed the dining table, which was covered in school permission slips. She stopped to sign one, then realized she needed to check the family calendar to see if the field trip date worked. She opened her laptop, but a notification popped up about a sale on ergonomic office chairs. 3 hours later, Sarah was deep into a research rabbit hole about the history of lumbar support in mid-century furniture. The soccer jersey was still on the floor. The laundry mountain hadn't moved. Sarah felt a familiar wave of heat rise in her chest. It was a mixture of shame and genuine confusion. She had wanted to do the laundry. She had been standing right in front of it. Why did her brain treat a pile of cotton like a maze she couldn't escape? To Sarah, it felt like a character flaw. She felt like she was failing at being a grown-up. She looked at the pile and felt a physical sense of dread, the same way someone might feel looking at a steep cliff they were being forced to climb without a rope. What Sarah didn't know was that she was experiencing a classic intention-to-action gap. Her brain's secretary, that prefrontal cortex David Ferrier studied, had stepped out for a coffee break the moment she picked up that jersey. The gap between knowing and doing. Dr. Russell Barkley, one of the leading experts on ADHD, often says that ADHD is not a disorder of knowing what to do. It is a disorder of doing what you know. This is a vital distinction. Most cleaning advice is built on the idea that you just need to know a better way to fold a shirt or know which bin to buy. But for Sarah, and for most of us with ADHD brains, the knowledge isn't the problem. Sarah knows how a washing machine works. She knows where the socks go. The problem is the bridge between the thought, I should do this, and the physical movement of her body toward the task. In the world of science, there is a condition called optic ataxia. People with this condition can see an object perfectly clearly. If you hold up a spoon, they can tell you it's a spoon, what color it is, and what it's for. But when they try to reach out and grab it, their hand misses. Their brain can see the target, but it can't coordinate the reach. ADHD cleaning is often a form of executive ataxia. You can see the mess. You can describe the mess. You can even feel guilty about the mess. But when you try to reach for the task, your brain's coordination system misses the mark. Instead of picking up the shirt, you find yourself researching office chairs. This isn't a lack of discipline. It's a glitch in the brain's global positioning system. Your brain has lost the map of the next 5 minutes, so it defaults to the thing that provides the quickest spark of interest, the dopamine. Why boring is physically painful. To understand why the laundry feels like a threat, we have to talk about dopamine. Think of dopamine as the fuel for your internal conductor. In a neurotypical brain, the conductor has a steady supply of fuel. They can get through a boring task like folding towels because their brain provides a tiny bit of dopamine just for finishing a job. It's a good job chemical reward that keeps them moving. In an ADHD brain, the fuel tank is chronically low. When we face a task that is repetitive, slow, and offers no immediate reward, like laundry, our brain doesn't just get bored. It enters a state of low arousal that feels physically painful. Benjamin Franklin, the great inventor and founding father, struggled with this his entire life. We think of Franklin as a man of perfect order, but his private journals tell a different story. He famously tried to master 13 virtues, and order was the one that nearly broke him. He wrote about his printing shop, where he desperately wanted every tool to have a specific place. He knew where things should go. But he found the daily grind of putting them back so incredibly dull that he constantly slipped into chaos. Franklin described his struggle with order as a fatiguing effort. He wasn't being lazy. He was fighting a brain that craved the excitement of lightning strikes and political revolutions, not the placement of a printing plate. He was a dopamine seeker, long before we had a word for it. When Sarah looks at the laundry, her brain is screaming for a spark. Because the laundry provides zero dopamine, her brain views the task as a threat to its survival. The amygdala, the brain's alarm system, starts chirping. It says, "Don't go over there. There is no energy there. Go look at the chairs. The chairs have new information. Information is energy." This is why you can be exhausted and still unable to start a simple chore. Your brain is trying to protect you from the pain of boredom. It treats the laundry pile like a predator because, in a biological sense, a lack of stimulation feels like a lack of life. The myth of the lazy label. If you have lived with a messy house for a long time, you have likely adopted the lazy label. You might use it as a shield or a weapon against yourself. "I'm just lazy," you say when a friend asks why you haven't cleared the dining table. But laziness is a choice. Laziness is when you have the capacity to do something, you have the energy to do it, the path is clear, and you simply choose to sit down instead. That is not what Sarah was experiencing. Sarah was standing in her hallway, heart racing, wanting to work, but feeling like her feet were stuck in wet cement. When we call ourselves lazy, we are looking at the moral weight of dust. We are assuming that a clean house is a sign of a good person, and a messy house is a sign of a bad or weak person. But David Ferrier's laboratory taught us that morality has nothing to do with the prefrontal cortex. The struggle to sequence a task is a technical issue, not a moral one. It is a hardware problem. If your computer keeps crashing when you try to run a heavy program, you don't call the computer sinful. You realize the processor is overwhelmed. You realize it needs a different way to handle the data. Sarah's laundry mountain was a heavy program. Her brain was trying to run it on an overwhelmed processor. Once she began to realize that she wasn't ignoring the laundry, but was literally blind to the steps required to finish it, the shame started to pull back just a little bit. The first step of the pivot. To fix a problem, you first have to name it correctly. If you name the problem laziness, the solution is willpower. But if you have ADHD, you have already tried willpower. You have tried gritting your teeth. You have tried just doing it. And yet, the mountain remains. If we rename the problem executive dysfunction or sequencing blindness, the solution changes. We stop trying to find more will and start looking for scaffolding. Imagine you are trying to build a house. If you don't have the physical strength to lift a heavy beam, you don't just stand there and scream at yourself for being weak. You go get a crane. You use a tool that bypasses your physical limit. In the chapters to come, we are going to build cranes for your brain. We are going to find ways to bypass the sequencing gap and the dopamine drought. But the very first crane is the one Sarah found while standing in her hallway. It's the realization that her brain treats chores as threats because it's trying to navigate without a map. A quiet landing. Sarah didn't finish the laundry that Tuesday. She didn't even get the jersey into the machine. But for the first time, she didn't throw her old blank planner in the trash with a cry of defeat. She sat down on the bottom step of the stairs and looked at the pile. She thought about the conductor. She thought about how her internal music was just a bit loud and disorganized today. Instead of telling herself she was a failure, she said out loud, "My brain is having a hard time finding the next step." It was a small change, but it felt like a heavy weight being lifted off her shoulders. The laundry was still there, but the threat felt smaller. She realized she wasn't fighting her own character. She was just learning how to work a very complicated piece of machinery, her own mind. If you are reading this while sitting near your own version of a laundry mountain, take a breath. Your brain isn't broken. It's just trying to protect you. It's looking for the how-to and coming up short. The shame you feel isn't a sign that you are a bad person. It's a sign that you care deeply about doing better. We are going to stop asking your brain to just be normal. We are going to start giving it the maps, the dopamine, and the structures it needs to turn that noise into a song. The mountain isn't going anywhere yet, but you are no longer standing at the base without a rope. You are starting to see the path. Your brain struggles with sequencing, not willpower. Chores feel like threats because they are low dopamine tasks. You aren't lazy, you are experiencing a biological disconnect. The goal isn't to try harder, but to build scaffolding. The fog in the London lab in 1876 eventually cleared, revealing the secrets of the mind. The fog in your hallway can clear too. It starts by putting down the lazy label and picking up a new understanding of how your unique, creative, and complex brain actually works. Chapter 2: Dismantling the Myth of Laziness. If you could float high above the dusty streets of a small American town in the year 1841, you would see a very specific pattern. In every house, from the smallest cottage to the largest brick home, the same dance is happening. Women are up before the sun, hauling heavy buckets of water, scrubbing wooden floors until their knuckles are raw, and beating rugs until the air is thick with dust. To an outsider, it looks like simple work. But if you look closer at their faces, you see something more than just tiredness. You see a heavy sense of duty. In this world, a clean house isn't just a nice thing to have. It is a report card for your soul. If there is bread on the floor or a smudge on the window, it doesn't just mean you are busy. It means you are failing. It means you are, in the eyes of your neighbors and your God, a lazy person. This wasn't an accident. This way of thinking was being built, brick by brick, by one of the most famous women in the country. Her name was Catherine Beecher. While her sister, Harriet Beecher Stowe, was writing famous novels, Catherine was busy writing the rules for the American home. She published a book called A Treatise on Domestic Economy, and it changed everything. Catherine Beecher believed that the home was the most important place on earth. She argued that a woman's job wasn't just to keep a house, but to be a minister of the home. She linked cleanliness directly to a person's moral and spiritual standing. In her mind, a messy room was a sign of a messy mind and a sinful heart. She created a world where cleanliness is next to godliness wasn't just a catchy phrase, it was a law. This is the exact moment in history where we started to believe that dust has a moral weight. We stopped seeing a pile of laundry as a pile of clothes, and started seeing it as a pile of our own failures. This cult of domesticity told us that if we couldn't keep a perfect home, we were fundamentally broken. The birth of the laziness lie. The problem with Catherine Beecher's rules is that they were written for people whose brains work in a very specific linear way. She didn't account for the person who gets distracted by